Do you think leadership is becoming more performative, especially when it comes to culture?
Yes. Leadership has always sort of been performative in a way, and that varies, right? I don't want to put down all leaders at all companies, of course, but when we think about a CEO of a large company, we've hit this era where CEOs have to be posting, right? They have to be building a brand. And 95% of social media is performative, right? And it's mostly bullshit, if I can say that on here. I don't think it's a leadership only issue, but I think because we're seeing every leader now have to perform on social media, we're seeing that. And there are some great ones. I think about John Hugh, the CEO of Stan. I think Stan's a cool company. I'm not sponsored by them. They haven't paid me to say any of this. I think he's very authentically building in public. When he's talking about the projects he's on, when it's failing, he talks about why it's failing. Like, that's something I love to see from people. I mean, a lot of CEO content is just this generic fluff, AI or ghost written, whichever way they want to go, that you can tell just doesn't mean anything. And you can tell their employees don't even believe it or support it.
Hi, I'm Christy Honeycutt, your host of Inside the C-Suite, where execs get real about leadership, impact, and what truly drives high-stake decisions. Everyone's talking about AI. Not enough leaders are talking about integrity. In this episode, I sit down with Mike Peditto, founder of Realistic Recruiting, author of Yes, You're Being Judged, keynote speaker, and one of the most authentic voices in talent. After being laid off multiple times, Mike stopped saying what people wanted to hear and started saying what leaders needed to hear. The result, a community of over 400,000 followers, a reputation for challenging the status quo in recruiting, AI, and leadership. We unpack his villain origin story, the dangerous gap between employer branding and employee reality, and why asking HR to own AI before defining a people strategy is setting organizations up to fail. Because your culture isn't built by what you post, it's built by what your people experience. Let's jump in, shall we? Mike, welcome back to the States. I know that my introduction did not do you justice. I would love it if you'd share with the audience who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I would love if I knew how to share that with anybody too. My name is Mike Peditto. I am a former recruiter, but still kind of a current recruiter, corporate burnout who still works within corporate. I spent my career hiring and building teams at companies and mostly startups. And one day started making content about it after a layoff, and the content blew up. People were into it. And I kept making content. I kept working and have somehow gotten myself into a situation where I do like 10 different jobs, I think similar to you and how you feel like you're touching everything. And now I have a recruiting podcast. I consult with companies on hiring. I wrote a book about hiring. I make content every day about hiring. And then when I'm not in front of my phone doing that, I'm out there actively recruiting and hiring people. I always say it's super arrogant, but the line I always say is, I'm not a recruiting influencer. I am a recruiter with influence. And that's where I like to sort of sit in what I do.
I love that, a recruiter with influence. So I want to jump somewhere just immediately because you have the unique capability of making people feel uncomfortable in a good way. So I'd like to start somewhere uncomfortable. So we live in a world where every CEO has a strategy. They have a LinkedIn strategy. Every company has an employer brand. Every leader talks about culture, yet engagement continues to decline. Why do you think that is?
Because the word culture is a buzzword that doesn't mean anything, is pretty much the main thing. I talk about this all the time, right? The idea of culture is like, yes, it's the nice idea of it. If I talk about it from like a hiring standpoint, and I say this to candidates all the time, and advice I always give candidates is, I'll start at the lowest level, right? Like, stop asking what's the culture like, because it doesn't mean anything. Because what the person's going to say is, yeah, it's great here. And they're going to tell you like a reason they like it. Like, culture means something different to everybody. I may think is a great culture at a company. You might hate about that company. And I think that's where just a breakdown starts. That's why there's no engagement through this stuff, because they just become these meaningless buzzwords and values. And I just saw a great keynote the other week. Whenever this airs, it'll be the other week, by George Rogers, if you know George. And he put up these stats. And one of the things it said, I think it was 25% of employees believe their company cares about their values and represents their values. And it's just, there it is. Like, that's the breakdown right there. They just are buzzwords on the wall at most places.
That is such a great stat and such a huge disconnect. So do you think leadership is becoming more performative, especially when it comes to culture?
Yes. Leadership has always sort of been performative in a way. And that varies, right? I don't want to put down all leaders at all companies, of course. But when we think about a CEO of a large company, we've hit this era where CEOs have to be posting, right? They have to be building a brand. Everyone has to be a brand. And 95% of social media is performative, right? And it's mostly bullshit, if I can say that on here. So
I don't trust you unless you say that.
I don't think it's a leadership only issue, but I
Yes.
think because we're seeing every leader now have to perform on social media, we're seeing that. And there are some great ones. I think about John Hugh, the CEO of Stan. And I think Stan's a cool company. I think they're doing a lot of things. I've used it a lot. I'm not sponsored by them. They haven't paid me to say any of this, but I think he's very authentically building in public. When he's talking about the projects he's on, when it's failing, he talks about why it's failing, right? And that's something I love to see from people. But yeah, I mean, a lot of CEO content is just this generic fluff, AI or ghost written, whichever way they want to go, that you can tell just doesn't mean anything. And you can tell their employees don't even believe it or support it.
So in a way, social media is exposing the authentic from the inauthentic. Would you agree?
I think if you're smart enough and able to discern it, yes. Unfortunately, a lot of people can't discern that stuff, but it's no different than when you make a post on LinkedIn or I make a post on LinkedIn and I get 50 comments that are clearly AI written, just summarizing what you wrote, right? Most people can look at that and be like, oh, this isn't authentic at all. But someone out there is reading it, being like, wow, what great insight this person added here.
I love it. So you have a villain origin story, which I think is phenomenal. So I'm going to ask this question and I would love you to walk us through the experience.
Yeah.
What happens when the leader you admired publicly becomes the leader who fires you privately?
As someone who's been fired by many leaders in my career, what happens in reality, in the span of the big world, is nothing. They go on fine, just continuing to do what they do. I think they rely on the fact that in the world we have, they're protected and insulated from this stuff, right? And I don't know how into the story we're going to get.
We can go as deep as you want to go.
Years later, I've posted about what happened. The asshole I am thanked her in my book. It was in the acknowledgement section, but I didn't use her full name, right? I've never mentioned the company. She knows I won't ever do it. It's just she don't, and I don't really want to because I don't want to get into a public battle. You watch that stuff play out on the internet and it's gross. Nobody looks good. People are always why don't you name her? Why don't you name the company? I'm because what will that do? What will happen for anyone? The answer is the truth is nothing happens. But for you, it can become a wake-up call. I don't want to say this person was my hero, obviously, but it's the same idea of never meeting your heroes, right? Or most things are not as good behind the scenes as what they're presenting to be. So if you go and work for someone who has a very public profile and seems to be this great, well put together person who cares about everything, I was probably ignorant myself, just assuming everything on the surface is what things really were. But that was sort of, I guess, my moment of learning those things in my career, that nothing's as shiny as it looks.
So where did you start to see the disconnect that what you bought wasn't really what you purchased?
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty immediate, but it's funny because I started making content. The first TikTok video I ever made was during my onboarding week of this job. And the reason I was doing it is because I was bored and had nothing to do because they brought me in as this senior level leader, but they had this very prescriptive level onboarding that involved me sitting around doing nothing a lot of time and just waiting for certain meetings or certain videos I had to watch or whatever else. I was bored. I started making TikTok videos and it changed my life. So I guess thanks for that. It started there. I can think about during the interview process, me and this person who was the chief people officer at the company, we were very close. We connected very quickly. We were excited. We talked about all these things we were going to do together. And then I couldn't get FaceTime. There was a middle manager between us. And then that was that person's job. It was a literal gatekeeper. And keep in mind, this was a Series C level company with 250 employees. This company did not need middle management gatekeepers. We were not that size. And it became very clear that I couldn't. It took a month just to get a meeting set up one-on-one. And then during that meeting with them, when it was one-on-one, could tell I was the fifth most important priority happening during that meeting. And it was okay, well, here's your new employee. Here's your one-on-one time you're getting with them as the C-level person in their department. And that felt wrong. And then they sat in a hiring debrief meeting and they were sort of arguing for stuff that I couldn't believe they were arguing for in terms of how we were evaluating a candidate. And when I pushed back a little, it became very clear. It was one of those record scratching moments. You're pushing back on what this person's saying. We don't do that here. Everyone was staring at me, just what are you doing? They said, this is what it is. It's what it is. And it was just clear. I was this isn't going to work out. And I started putting feelers out. I mean, I was 3-4 weeks in. I was messaging people who I was interviewing for roles with them and the role went on hold or whatever it was. I was hey, I hate doing this, but I can just tell I don't think I'm in the right spot. So if your role unfreezes, I'm here. Let me know. I was putting those feelers out and I got fired a couple weeks later because for them, it was much lower risk. to just fire me. We both knew it wasn't going to work. And those cracks were showing up in like every instance. Everything you hoped to get out of that person wasn't there.
Yeah, that's interesting because when you do, there's 5 or 6 most important things in your lifetime, right? So like marriage, divorce, birth of a baby, death, but job is one of them as well. And a career change. And so everyone goes into it hopeful and everyone wants to believe. So if you could look back, I mean, obviously this worked out really good for
Sure.
you. So it was a great learning lesson.
You'll never catch me like getting fired is a real lucky thing for all of you. Like for most people, it's not. Like for me, it worked out, but I know that's not how it usually goes.
Well, it feels like to me you had an awakening in that moment, right? If you were able to read the signs, but if you could go back and you're guiding someone who finds themselves in this position, how do they know? What's the top 3 things that you're like, hey, if these red flags show up, start your exit plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some of it goes back to the interviewing. Despite all the advice I give, despite everything I say to job seekers when I talk to them, I was an unemployed person who also wanted work, right? I also overlooked things that I shouldn't have because I didn't want to be on the job market anymore. And it's why I really talk to them about, I get it. Some people are just need to take a job, but also not being desperate for a job is going to work out for you in the long run if you can avoid that. So I think a lot of it would have started there. I would have asked more questions. I was excited. This person was in a spot I wanted to be. They were doing a lot of stuff I wanted. So like I saw that with just sort of the glitter and glitz on it, and I wanted it, but I didn't ask questions. I didn't ask how often can we get some time together. I just sort of assumed like, yeah, we're talking about having time together. I didn't really dig into what's the management structure like, because it was weird that there was layers of middle management at a Series C company with under 300 employees. And the truth is, everyone liked it too much in the interviews. And I think that's a little weird. I do think there's a little too much. You don't want someone on your interview panel who's going to put down your company, but you do need someone real in the interview process. And that was the role I usually play at companies. So I'll tell you the good stuff, but I'm also going to tell you what's going to be hard for you here, because I don't want you to be gone in 6 weeks if we bring you in. And I don't think I looked for that stuff enough or pushed on it. I just accepted, oh, everyone here drank the Kool-Aid, so it must be that good. And I was a notorious Kool-Aid drinker earlier in my career as well. So I was just excited that everyone else had. And then I think getting in, I heard another stat somewhere, I forget where, the average employee who doesn't last knows they're not going to last by like day 2 or day 3 or something. And I did too. I could tell, like in week 1. And I don't know if you've ever been in a role that short amount of time and if you felt that as well, but I think anyone who has probably knew within a week. So I think all of the signs really are about finding them before you get there, because once you're there, they hit you, right? You notice them right away. Like no one's ever like had a great first month and then in week 5, things like turn sour.
I too, my friend, have experienced this, and it came down to that beautiful word that we all like to say, which is culture, because it was 100% not a fit, not what I was sold. And I'm going to ask you this question. How dangerous is it when leaders start believing in their own LinkedIn post?
It's a funny question because like in a perfect world, they would believe in them because they'd be true and they'd be good. But I think the implication here is we all know what they're doing is performing and not writing the real thing. So yes, that is dangerous. And that's what was happening at this company. And it's happened at plenty of other companies I've been to as well. I think it's that same idea again of like everything can't be great. And if you're going to have a leader who posts on LinkedIn, I think part of the post has to also be like, here's where we screwed up. And it can't just be, we did layoffs today and here's the mistake I made, right? This has to happen more often than that screw up post. Because we see that a lot, right? We don't need the crying CEO back on LinkedIn about how sad he feels about layoffs. Again, that's why I went back to like John at Stan, because he had a huge failure a few months ago that his company sort of got on the brink. And he was like, well, if this doesn't work out in the next 60 days, we might be finished. And right, I think like that's the stuff people want to see. So if they're believing all of that, perfect. If a CEO believes everything is great at their company because they're only posting great things, that's when they're either keeping their head in the sand or just like lying to the public. And then the same thing always happens. Something comes out where you do a mass layoff, and then all of a sudden we see how things were in. And I think everyone is finally waking up to realizing that like, that's probably what's really happening at these places.
100%. Well, and I know we talked about culture is kind of a myth, the word culture, and employer brand, I believe, is broken. I mean, it was a buzzword back in the day. One thing I believe is that culture isn't what leaders say, but it's what people say after hours that they whisper is your true culture. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great way to say it. I've heard similar sayings where it's sort of like, culture is how your employees feel on Sunday night. It's just kind of like, I know those are immeasurable things, of course, but yeah, I mean, culture is how your employees feel working there and what they say and think. And of course, most people don't want to be at work, and the idea of a dream job is sort of silly for most people, right? So we have to kind of temper what that means.
Exactly.
Just because employees don't love it doesn't mean it's bad. But are they miserable? Do they feel like themselves? Do they feel like everything's a lie? Do they feel like they're building a house of cards that's about to collapse? That stuff really does matter, which is why like when I advise people and I say like, stop asking what's the culture like, my advice is always ask about what's important to you. Right? Because culture is everything. For you, if culture is the ping pong table and then the kombucha kegs and whatever else, like ask about them, see if they're there. For me, culture is how are mistakes handled? How is feedback delivered? What's the average time off your employees take? Can you tell me about a time you promoted someone on your team? All right, that's more important culture to me, but you might not care about that. So that's why there's no magic questions to ask, but it's just like, I describe culture as what's important to you to feel okay working at this place. And that's what you need to figure out if they're going to provide that for you or not.
I really like the way you said that. And you make me think of the multi-generational workforce that we're in, because what's important to me at 51, if I was to go work at a corporation again versus what my son at 30 is important to him, are vastly different things.
Yeah.
So I love that point of view because culture is in the eye of the beholder and their experience that they're going to have. So the questions should be unique to them and not built by marketing and defined by your employees on Monday morning. It's like, it really is what's important to them. Do they believe in the mission, vision, values? What do you put out? Like my boys won't eat at certain restaurants because they don't agree with how they source the food.
Sure.
So, and for me, I'm just like, oh, I'm so addicted to this chicken thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how I couldn't do this. So there's vastly differences in the generations. And I think you touch on that.
Yeah. And all the studies show that like what matters to Gen Z is different than what matters to Gen X and to boomers and millennials. And this is the most amount of mixed generation workforce we've ever had. And it's really not a thing people talk about or like plan around. Like it's just whoever's in charge, whatever generation they're in, they sort of just assume, yeah, everyone should just do it the way I want.
100% on everything. That is so great. So we find ourselves in the AI gold rush. AI, right?
I've heard of it.
I'm cross-eyed about AI. Everyone is buying it and very few people actually know why. And you spend a lot of your time, you're passionate about this too, obviously, because you've been in recruitment for so long and you help companies elevate kind of how they're assessing and what steps to take. I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about that today. In particular, what's one of the biggest lies companies are being sold today?
One of the biggest lies that companies are being sold with these AI tools is that they can do the things they're being promised they can do, right? And what I mean by that is like, obviously there's some good ones, but the biggest disconnect right now to me in companies who want AI on like the HR side of things and companies selling AI, companies building these tools are building them around what they think the company's biggest issues and needs are. And they're telling the companies, these are your biggest needs and my tool can fix it. And for a lot of companies, it's not the biggest need, right? There are a million AI sourcing tools out there now, but what if sourcing is not my biggest need? No offense to, I can name any of them, to Juicebox or to Pin or to GoPerfect or any of these companies, but if sourcing's not a problem here, stop grabbing my executives on the floor at HR Tech and telling them how they need your software. And to my executives on the floor, stop being told what your biggest problem is. And I think that I have like a keynote talk that I do, and I'm doing it at HR Tech this year, but 10 questions HR should be asking before they buy AI, but probably isn't. That can't be the title. I need to work on that.
Guys, if you have suggestions, send them to Mike.
Like this title is terrible, but the idea of it is great. But a huge one is figuring out what your problem is. What are you trying to solve for? Because again, these tools want to fix everything, right? They just want to make hiring better, and they're built by people who have never hired for anything in their life until they opened up this company. And they may not be doing what you need, right? It's just like different ATS systems are good for different things, right? Or maybe AI interviewing isn't a thing that's going to help you at your company because you don't do enough hiring despite all these tools that are coming, and you don't need an all-in-one tool that does it. I think finding a specialized thing that solves what you need. And then the other big thing that I don't think it's said enough, and I think executives and HR leaders and everyone else needs to ask, is what data is this trained on?
That's a
and
great question.
Tell you what, when you ask most salespeople at these companies that question, they have no idea. They will start talking to you about, the LLMs and the machine learning. And like, they're just like start saying the words they learned to say, and they have no clue. And we could get into a whole thing about how it leads to bias hiring. We could lead into what's happening with Workday and all these things. But like, let's let all that play out first. At the same time, is it being trained on your company's data? Is your company's data good? Is it being trained on what some other company did? Like, where's it coming from? Is it just a ChatGPT wrapper? And if you're listening and don't know what that means, it's essentially a lot of these AI companies didn't build their own AI. They just build into you ask it a question and it goes and asks ChatGPT for you and brings you back the answer.
the middle manager again.
Yeah. So you're just pulling in whatever ChatGPT would have said, which we all know is problematic. So I just think that there's this disconnect. And a big reason for it is HR tends to be the least technical department at most companies. And that used to be an excuse for a long time. And I'm seeing a lot of people talk about this. And I think I'm seeing this become a thing that like HR has to stop giving this stuff over to IT to figure out. And they need to figure it out themselves and they need to learn it and they need to ask questions. They need to get better with it. Because when you get out of the way, the right questions stop being asked and it just becomes like, what's the best technical product for us?
I love that. And we know this in recruitment. I've got 20 years and IBM, a Korn Ferry, and all the great brands, but it comes down to how well you know what your needs are. Like you talked about, identify your needs and then ask the questions to get to the solution to solve your needs, because any salesperson is going to try to sell you, but they're going to try to upsell you as well. So if you have a true understanding of what you need, and then you have people like yourself that you can go to and trust and say, hey, Mike, what are you seeing? Here's what I need. And you can go, oh, you don't need that. This has what you need. But I do find that I'm seeing that a lot as well. Where do you think a lot of the pressure is coming from to purchase and implement AI? Do you think it's boards, CEOs, investors?
It's up from the top. And I mean, it could be coming from investors, board, CEO, whatever your company structure is. But every HR leader is feeling that squeeze coming from above to figure out ways to get AI, make us more AI forward, AI, get it in here, use it, get better because of AI. Or we'll replace you, right? We'll just get it. And then now you're taking these least technical people at the company and sending them onto the expo floors at a lot of these events. And they're just like being spun around in circles.
Mm-hmm.
And if not there, through their email or wherever else. But like, I mean, that's where it's coming from, right? Like executives don't want to be left behind. They want our company is using AI to be better and more efficient. And it's not always from a nefarious place, right? Some of it is so that we can get rid of 70% of the department and do whatever. But
right.
A lot of it is also just because we're supposed to, and these are the tools and we don't want to be behind and no one's stopping to ask the right questions. I attended a workforce planning conference a couple months ago. And I honestly walked out of it scared because I heard so many people basically just like saying, both speakers and attendees, like, yeah, HR is now in charge of using AI to figure out how we can get 60% more efficient in every department and who we're going to get rid of, right? And we're going to do them. Just like, who made you good at that? How do you know what you're doing? Like, well, we don't. But we have to go. Then they're talking about they're using words they don't know what it means. I saw a funny LinkedIn post just yesterday that said, no, you're not a native AI expert. Like you're old as balls and don't know what you're talking about. And I think that's what most leaders are like at companies now. We all want to talk about how we're great with AI and we're implementing this stuff, but like, no, we're not. No one knows this stuff. Like, they're all still figuring it out as they go. But the pressure is coming from the CEO. You can't admit that to them.
That's like holding a recruiter accountable for tenure of an employee once they've been post 90 days and they've gone through onboarding and they're with the manager. That's interesting to me because HR is an extremely important function. So is recruitment, so is talent, all of that. But it's just crazy to me. You're saying a lot of things that resonate with me because we are setting companies up to fail by not being intentional, mindful, and like really looking at it from the inside out. And we can't lose sight of the humanity. And me personally, I think that talent in HR, they're your people. Like, keep the humanity there as much as you can.
Yeah. And the end game here is 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. I don't know how any of these processes play out. We are some amount of time away from an infinite number of lawsuits from so many companies. Even with the Workday suit, this Mobley versus Workday, they called in discovery that everyone who's used this Workday tool has to turn over their hiring data for this. And that's just step one. The machine told me is no longer going to be okay. And when this stuff keeps moving, right, is all AI bad? Is everyone going to get sued? Of course not. But like, we're going to have to figure out who's doing it right, illegally. How many employees at your company, if you're listening to this, have uploaded something into their ChatGPT or Claude account that they shouldn't have to plan for a meeting or for an interview or whatever it is? One day that's going to get called into discovery. It's just going to. So I just think this like lack of education around how to use these tools appropriately is like so dangerous. And right now, like no one's even like thinking about like what's going to happen.
Oh my gosh, we could talk for this for days, but obviously that's why you have a keynote speech at HR Tech. So I'll have to come sit in and hear that.
So figure out the title first.
I know. We could start a poll. I think you're going to come up with a good one. So when we talk about authenticity, and this is actually, you and I met, I reached out to you because I just had several people drop your name and I started to look at your content and I fell in love with you professionally because you say the hard thing. You say the truthful thing. And I think our world needs that right now. So you shared something that resonated with me though. And it was, you were talking about how you failed, but it was because you stopped being yourself. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that because I see that a lot. And I don't know why we feel the need to dress up or show up differently for success versus actually leaning into ourselves. Can you share a little bit about that story?
Yeah, it's an older story in my career where I was killing it at this company. I was an agency recruiter at the time. Like, this is way back. And I was the best. I was so good at it. And I was making money and I was breaking records and all this stuff. And I was a good recruiter, which is how we got here. And but I wanted more. I didn't think people took recruiters serious enough. It always felt like the low man on the totem pole type of thing. And I know it's probably not the best analogy to keep making these days, but it's what it felt like. And I wanted to move into account management. I felt like they were more respected. They were making more money. They were the business developers. And I asked for it. And my boss and everything was like, no, don't do it. It's not for you. You're good at this, which only made me want to do it more.
Of course.
They're like, it's more of a professional thing. It's more of a this, it's more of a that. And so I started trying to get the job. I started trying to impress them. I started showing up in blazers and nicer pants and things to work first. And of course, everyone noticed immediately on day one. I'm like, what do you mean? No, this is how I always dress. Yeah. And talking a little bit more professionally. And so they eventually gave me the opportunity and I sucked at it. And the reason I sucked at it is because I was trying to do what I saw all the other successful account managers doing. They were more professional than me. They were better put together. They were, as the person in charge of this company said to me, and I tell this story all the time because I still got the role and I still worked there for a very long time. She told me, you would be the first ever unattractive account manager I hired. And I just let that be said to me and continue on with life. It's just like I said, the things we do earlier in our career. She was right though. There were very attractive women in this role. And then there was me. And I was trying to be them. And it wasn't working and I was not getting clients. I didn't feel comfortable cold reaching out to them and nothing was working right. I'd go and sit in the meetings in my khakis and suit shirt and all this stuff. And I'd be very stiff and wasn't working and it failed. It failed miserably. And eventually I asked to switch back and they were like, yes, we've been waiting for you to ask this question. No, I was very lucky that I was able to switch back because they knew that I could jump back into recruiting and be fine with it. But it almost cost me so much. They easily could have let me go had I not built up years of good kind of loyalty there by being successful. And it was such a lesson for me because it comes to social media and you and I were talking before recording and you watch me on social media and you even said, I don't want to be like Mike. And I was just I don't think you should be like Mike, right? You should be like Christy Honeycutt. That's who you should be.
But I'm inspired by Mike.
Sure. Yeah. I could have taken inspiration from successful account managers and figured out how to do it my way, just like I did Mike. As a recruiter. And I think that was just a lesson to me that was, hey, I'm not for everyone and that's okay. And I'm not going to be good at everything and that's okay. And that comes across in my content now. I make it very clear. I made a post just today that's reasons you should follow me or unfollow me. And one of the things was just sort of, this is who I make content for. And welcome or go away. Whatever choice you want, that's fine. I'm never going to have 10 million followers and be on a billboard in Times Square, right? I'm going to put out
Don't say never
on the internet. There's just no way. There's no way that many people like me. But it's just sort of I speak to the people who want to hear from me. And it was the same way as a recruiter. And it's everywhere that I ever went. It's why most of my life is also working in startups, right? Because you get a little bit more of that, the ability to be you. And when being me didn't work, I lost a job in 6 weeks. But that's just sort of how it goes. But it was just that was the lesson. I was just changing to fit in would not have worked for me.
Well, and the reason that I wanted to talk to you about that is because you have built a community of 400,000 followers. So I'm not going to throw that over my shoulder that you might not be on the
10
New York
million
Times.
Is far away from that.
I have faith in you. I have faith in you. But you come across incredibly authentic, which I love. And that's what drew me to you, hence probably your other 399,000 followers. All right. So I'm going to take you through some rapid rounds really quick. I'm going to ask you some questions. What recruiting advice do you think should die in 2026?
For job seekers, all of it. But the thing I say is, and I made a video about this recently, almost any advice that starts with the phrase just or have you tried? Anything that you used to do to get a job, if you have not found a job in the last 3 years, let's say, stop telling it to people. Stop telling them to just network. They've heard it, but they don't know what that means. They either don't have a networks or everyone's networks are tapped and we're all struggling to help people find jobs that we know. Stop saying, have you tried reaching out to hiring managers? Have you tried reaching out to recruiters? Yes, they've tried it. As a recruiter, I will tell you that when I open up a job, I get 300 LinkedIn messages that day from people doing it. All of the things that you used to say work, don't work in a world where applications have doubled since 2022. They just aren't the same. I shouldn't say they don't work because everything can work to get you a job. But like what needs to die in terms of advice is the stuff that has always worked for you, telling it to someone like it is the answer and the solution.
Different time, different place, different space for sure. So let's do the rapid fire.
That wasn't rapid, was it?
I told Mike I would tell him to speed it up. Here we go. I'd like you to complete the sentence. Leadership is...
Wow, you hit me for a blue line. Leadership is different for everyone.
Like it. AI is...
somewhere in the middle of everyone's opinion.
Worst hiring advice ever.
Hire for personality.
One thing every CEO should ask their employees tomorrow morning.
Assuming that they'll get an honest answer. What would make you feel happy to stay here?
Love that question. Well, my dear friend,
The truth is I hear that question. I'm like, I wouldn't feel comfortable answering anything my CEO asked me like that.
And usually that's what they're telling HR. Just saying.
Right.
Thank you so much for holding space, Mike. Before we drop, is there anything that you'd like to share that we didn't get a chance to cover? And how can the audience get a hold of you and work with you?
The audience can find me anywhere. You can find me on LinkedIn, just Mike Peditto on LinkedIn. I will pop right up. You can find me if you're a TikTok or Instagram user at Realistic Recruiting, but you can also just type my name in and find me there. If you're a book reader, you can find my book, Yes, You're Being Judged. If you're a recruiter, I have a podcast called Is This Still a Good Time for Recruiters Hanging On by a Thread. I always say it is the recruiting podcast where we're not interested in how to fill our pipeline by 15%. We're just going to talk about what it's like recruiting in 2026 and how everybody hates us. So those are all places you can find me. I always wish I had good departing wisdom for people. I think that my main thing that I always want people to know is just there's no real answers to almost any of this anymore, right? It's just sort of like life is a big gray area. And it's where I operate. It's where I talk from. It's where I make the content. There's a yes or no answer to most questions. It's like we said, like AI. I'm just like, yeah, it's somewhere in the middle of what everybody says. It's not going to go away forever, but it's not going to take over the world. And you're always going to hear that from me, right? That sort of middle gray area answer. And I think most people have to realize it's okay to operate in that space and not have the answer.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you from the bottom of my heart and our community's heart for the work that you're doing and for holding space for our audience. Guys, go connect with this guy. Try not to find him on Instagram. I dare you. And go like, follow, and subscribe to Inside the C-Suite and tell me who you want on next. It might be Stan's CEO. Ciao.
Bye.